All right, good. So, Daf Yomi for the month is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Moshe and Susie Feder, legally Nishmas. Mrs. Feder's father, Simcha Aryeh ben Yosef Tzvi, whose yahrzeit was on the 17th of Iyar. We are, according to Yehuda, on the very top of Chaf Amud Beis, right? We had a disagreement between Rava and Abaye as to the nature of what an Isar was. We understood that the Mivta was a language of Shavua, right? We understood the difference between a Shavua and a Neder, right, that we discussed. And then we started mentioning what is this language of Isar. And whether the word Isar, according to Abaye, he said that it was a language that connects an item to another Shavua, right? Because then there was a discussion whether you can, when something's connected to a Shavua or not connected to a Shavua, whether it has the power or the force of Shavua. Rava says, clearly something which is a Shavua that is connected to Shavua does not have the power of a Shavua. And so that is where we are up to. So he says, okay, so rather than starting right from Ella L'Rava, we'll just pick up from Chaf Amud Beis, Chaf Amud Aleph, the last two lines. Bishlam Labai. So fine, this comment that we just made, that we just had read, this issue, this brisa, that asked what is an Isar in the Torah, and then we said, this is somebody who says, I'm not going to eat basar, I'm not going to eat meat or wine, just like the day that my father passed away, or the day that so-and-so died, or the day that Gedalia ben Achikam was killed. And Shmuel explained that has to be that that he already had an existing oath or something that was preventing him from eating on those on those days. So Bishlam Allah Abaye Kidit Matfis ben Neder is a neder. So according to Abaye, who says, and this is fine, that connecting from that he holds that a language that compares something to another neder is a neder, so, because that's what Shmuel is saying here, that you're connecting from one neder to the other neder. That's what connects it here. So therefore, matbis b'shvua shvua. So that makes good sense because that also works by a shvua according to Abaye. But Ella l'Rava kasha. But Rava, who says that connecting something to an existing Shavua does not work. How would connecting something to an existing Neder work? That would not work. So, Amar Lach Rava, so Rava is going to explain, Tartz Vemahachi, this is how you have to explain it. Ezehu Isar Neder Ha'amar Batorah. And here we're not going to call it the actual Isar because we decided that we're not really talking according to Rava, we're going to say we're talking about the Neder itself. What is the binding Neder, which is discussed in the Torah? Somebody says that I'm not going to eat meat and I'm not going to drink wine like the day that my father died, like the day that so-and-so was killed. The Amar Shmuel, and Shmuel says, and that's because, and you have to be able to have a oath from the previous day, and that is the definition of what a neder works. That's a definition of a neder. We're not discussing what an Isar is. That's the discussion of how a neder works. My time, what's the reason? Because Amar Kra, Ish ki yidur neder la Hashem. Person makes a neder to Hashem, ad yidur bedavar hanodor. In order for a neder to work, you actually have to connect it to something else that is already previously prohibited. And as we mentioned yesterday, the Ramban, who comments on Rashi, that this connection of from one object to the other isn't necessarily required, right? You could theoretically say, I am taking a neder upon myself, but if you do make the connection, then it has to be done in this way. You have to connect it to something else that's already prohibited. And that's the general definition of how neder works. That's how the neder works. Okay, so it's not an Isar issue at all. Now, I think this is where we might have been up to here, but okay, so in any event, this might have been a review from yesterday. So let's discuss this issue. Kiyom shemes bo aviv. So we said that he's connecting it to the day that his father passed away. So pshita. So if he's taken, the day that your father passed away, so of course that's going to be if I'm connecting to something else that I had to take an oath in order for eating to be prohibited, for eating meat and wine to be prohibited. So that's clearly a circumstance, right? Somebody wouldn't be prohibited to eat meat or wine on a yurt site unless he took an oath to do so. So therefore, if you say I'm taking an oath, this should be also in the same way that is. That's clearly going to be effective.
Some do have a minute to fast.
Correct. Some people will do that. Yeah.
Fast on what? On
a yurt sites, right? Yeah. But that'll be a minhag. There's no halacha to it, so he would be able to take that upon himself. Kiyom shenerag bo gedalia. So therefore, what is the point of mentioning that connection? So the answer is Kiyom shenerag bo gedalia ben achikam itzrichlei. The answer is because we were leading up to the fact that even if he says that I'm prohibiting upon myself this, like the oath that I took to not eat meat or wine on Gedalia ben Achikam's day of death, which is, of course, already a public fast day.
Because usually taking off the fast on certain days as well.
And I don't know if the Chaver Kedisha are individuals, and they could be able to take on their own particular minhagim. I don't know that they have to fast on. Right, on a particular. So Salka Daitach, I would have thought to have said, Kevan dechi lo nader nami aser. I might have thought that since that day, you're not allowed to eat anyway. Gedai Achikam's day of death is already prohibited. Ki nader nami lo havya le isar. So therefore, when he takes such an oath, right? So that's not going to produce an isar of neder. Right, his oath to not eat meat or wine on that day doesn't prohibit anything. It doesn't work. V'hai lav mitvas benederhu. So therefore, when he comes along to make his next oath and say, I am going to not eat meat and wine, just like not eating meat and wine on the day of death of Gedalia ben Achikam, I might have thought that will not work, right? Because that's already prohibited because of the Chachamim. So Kamash Malan, therefore the Tan is coming to tell you that we do not say that, right? That this, since he does take that oath, that oath is effective to be able to be transferred from one to the other in any event, even though it's already publicly declared fast day and prohibited from the Chachamim. Va'af Rabbi Yochanan savar la laha de Rava. So Rabbi Yochanan also holds this of what Rav says, that the concept of that when you make an Isar Shvuah, when you connect from a Shvuah from one to the other, so he says that it has the force of a Shvuah itself. Dechi also Rabin, and how do you see that? Because when Rabin came from Eretz Yisrael, he said, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan, he said, Mivta lo achalach. If he says, I take a utterance, an oath, which we said is 100% an oath, that I'm not going to eat such and such, or he says, Isar lo achalach, where he says, I take an Isar, and an Isar connects to a previous oath, both of those are Shvuah. Both of those have the force of the Shvuah themselves. And so therefore, Rava holds that a connection to another oath is going to be of force of an oath. Okay, that ends that section. Now we have to define various types of averos that can be done through the oath process, through the utterance of oath process. And the reason why it's important is that Rashi says something very interesting over here. Rashi says that it is critical that we know what avera a person is doing, because in order to be chayav the punishment, when the person gives the warning, he has to tell the person the avera that you're doing is such and such, and this is the pasuk in the Torah that says you're not allowed to do it. Mm-hmm. So if you just say you're not allowed to do that, you're going to get malchus for taking that oath. That's not sufficient. You have to be able to. You get a punishment for it. That's also another. That in itself is not right. It's only if you violate it, right? So that's going to be the point. We have to be able to know what kind of a violation this is. So now we're going to have two different versions of Rabbi Yochanan to understand how the different types of things that you could say are defined. So let's start with the first one. Kiyasar Rav Dimi. When Rav Dimi came from Rabbi Yochanan, he said the name of Rabbi Yochanan as follows. If a person says, Ochel velo ochel, so sheker. So if a person takes an oath and he says, I'm going
to eat or not
to eat or not to eat, right? He says I'm going to eat, and he doesn't. So that's called sheker. That's a lie, right? And shvuah, that's a sheker. That is shvuah sheker. That's the prohibition. Vas harashei mehacha. The prohibition comes from this pasuk. Lo sishbeu bishmi sheker. You should not swear in my name falsely, right? And this is false. Achalti Velo achalti. Now that's for future tense, right? If he says I'm going to eat or I'm not going to eat, and he breaks that, that's sheker. Then we have this one, achalti velo achalti. Now past tense, I ate or I did not eat. So he says that's not sheker, that's shav. That is
Thought.
no, a shav. A Shevuos shav is a vain oath, right? They call that vain. Why? Because as soon as you say it, it's meaningless. It's wrong, right? Lying, I could do in the future. I will do something. No, you're not. That's lying. That's sheker. Shav means the past tense, right?
I was not going to do this.
I did. I ate. No, you didn't. As soon as you said it, it's shav. It's false. Vaz harasei mehacha. And the prohibition in the Torah for that is lo sisa es shem Hashem elokecha l'shav. That's the Aseret Dibros, right? Don't take Hashem's name l'shav. Okay. Then we have konamos. If a person is in violation of a konam is a different word for a neder. Konam is where comes from the word that's close to a korban. Korban, if I take something and say that this is a korban to me, this is something which is a sacrifice to me, then you're basically saying this is something that's prohibited to me. So the word konam is like a shvuah. So if you violate a shvuah, so then over the violation that you're violating is below yachel divaro. You violated, you shall not profane your words, right? Do not profane your words. It's in violation of something that you said, you didn't do, and that's a violation. So that is the three different averos. Again, sheker is future, shav is past, lo yachel dvaro is on the nedarim. It's on the nedarim. Okay? Meisvei, so he asks the following question. Question is, we have a statement here that we don't know what it means. Shav v'sheker echad hein. Brisa says that a shav and a sheker are the same thing. Now, they're obviously not the same thing because they wouldn't mean that they're the same thing. But we have to understand they're the same thing in regard to some halacha. So my lav mideshav the avar don't we say this brisa means that just like swearing something l'shav is in the past tense, right? This I don't remember what word we keep using. Shav is vain, right? Swearing in vain is in the past tense. Af sheker nami l'shavar. So also a false oath means it also is a past tense. So alma. So therefore, that would mean what we should say is achalti velo achalti sheker hu. So he says that means I ate or I did not eat would be a false oath. So, midi irya. So he says, nope, that's not the definition here. Ha k'de'isa v'ha k'de'isa. A sheker and a shav both don't mean the same retroactive thing. It doesn't mean retroactively. Umay davar echad hein. So how do we have to explain what it means that they are the same thing? So we're going to give 4 potential answers to what it means, right? First couple we're not going to keep. Third one we're going to like. Fourth one is going to be an alternative.
First one we're going to discard the first.
First 2 we're not going to like, but we'll try it again. The answer is, first of all, what does it mean that davar echad hein, a shav and a sheker, they are one thing? De bedibor echad nemru. They were spoken when Hashem gave the Aseret Dibros on Har Sinai. He spoke different. There's a different text in the Aseret Dibros. He said the words shav and sheker simultaneously at the same time, despite the fact that they don't mean the same thing. One means the future, one means the past. When Hashem gave the Torah,
But which commandment was that one?
Lo sisa Hashem l'kach l'shav. Right? So therefore it also says l'sheker, he says them both at the same time. Kidetanya, as we learned in a brisa. Zachor v'shamor bedibor echad nemru. Just like Hashem, when he gave the Aseret Dibros about Shabbos, he said the words Zachor and Shomer, right? In one Aseret Dibros in Parshas Yisro, it says one, in Va'eschanan it says the other. And the explanation is, Hashem said both of those words simultaneously. Masha ein yochel hapel l'daber, which a regular person's mouth cannot do. Hashem can do that. Masha she'ein ha'uzin yochel lishmo, even a person's ear can't hear when somebody says the one word simultaneously. It doesn't work. So that's suggestion number 1. When we say that the shav and sheker don't mean that they are the same thing, it means that they were said simultaneously. So bishlama hasam bedibor echad nemru, I understand by Shabbos to say that shamor and zachor were both said simultaneously. That's Kidder of Ada Barava. There's a reason for that. That makes sense why Hashem would do that, like Rav Ada Barava explained. Rav Ada Barava explains, Noshim chayavos bekiddush hayom, davar Torah. Women are obligated to make kiddush. From the Torah, Doraisa obligation, women have to make kiddush. Why? Because they're yotzei by a man. right? But if a woman was by herself, she'd have to make kiddush. Da'amar Kraz, the pasuk says, Zochar v'shamar, right? It says Zochar and Shamar with the same word. Kol sheyeshno b'shmira, anybody who is obligated in the negative commandments, and women are obligated in all negative commandments, Yeshno b'zchira is also obligated in the positive commandments.
A negative commandment for women is not to do laundry. That's a negative commandment.
The negative commandment in this circumstance is don't do a violation of work on Shabbos, right? Don't do work on Shabbos. And then the positive commandment is to make kiddush. So normally women are exempt from positive commandments that are time-bound, right? But this is not the case when it comes to Shabbos, because Shamar v'Zochar is said in the same language. So therefore, women are obligated both to do the mitzvahs los aseh and the mitzvahs aseh. V'hani nashi, so these women, hol v'isnu b'shmira, since they're obligated in the negative commandments, isnu nami b'schira, they're also obligated in the positive commandments. Ella, hachalamai hilchasa, miboyle. So he says, now here, if you're telling me that shav and sheker were said simultaneously, for what purpose? Hashem just doesn't play tricks. There has to be a goal in mind, and we don't have any tradition to explain why Shevuos shav and Shevuos sheker would be said simultaneously. Ella, so rather, kishem, so that answer, we get rid of that one. Ella, so rather, you know why shav and sheker are the same thing? Kishem shaloka al shav, just like you get malchus for taking a Shevuos shav, past tense, kach loka nami al sheker, so too, you're also going to get malchus for a Shevuos sheker for the future tense. Klape laya, so he says, isn't that sort of reversed? Ella, rather, you have to say it like this. Kishem shalok al sheker, we know that you're supposed to get malchus on a future tense oath. It's just a question about whether you're supposed to get the past tense one. One, kach lo kenami al shav, so too you're supposed to get malchus on the past tense ones, right? Pshita. So that seems logical. Why would you think that there's any distinction? If you are violating a lo saseh of an oath, why would one make a difference if you went the future tense or the past tense? Haylav v'haylav, they're both lo sasehs. No, ma'udutema, what would you have thought is like this? Kidamar le Rav Papa le Abaye. You might have explained like Rav Papa says to Abaye. Lo yinakeh, Pasuk says that, how do I know that when it comes to a Shevuos sheker, I'm supposed to get malchus? How do I know? How do I know that I'm supposed to get lashes for a Shevuos sheker? Because the pasuk says, lo yinakeh, right? Ki lo yinakeh, right? That you're not supposed to swear falsely because Hashem will not forgive you. Ki lo yinakeh. So I might have thought ki lo yinakeh klal means that you should not, that there's no way to get forgiven at all. Kamash milan kiddishani le. So we're going to explain like this explanation Abaye gave to Rav Papa, that no, it just means that Hashem will not forgive you, but you can get forgiven through Malchus, right? Beis Din takes care of you, not Hashem. Ve'i bois ema. Okay, so that is answer number 3. That one makes sense, right? We're going to be able to learn from the fact that you might have thought that Shevuos sheker you get malchus. We wouldn't necessarily know that you get Shevuos, you get malchus by Shevuos shav. So therefore, that statement is that we do in fact get malchus for Shevuos shav. So v'iba yisem, or else if you want, I will say kishem shemevi korban al sheker kach mevi korban al shav. Maybe what it's also saying is that just like I have to bring a korban on a Shevuos sheker, so too I also bring a korban if I violated Shevuos shav. So we had this korban olav yored. We had this argument between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael whether it only applies to oaths that are in the future tense or whether it applies to oaths in the future tense and the past tense. For Rabbi Akiva, this would be Rabbi Akiva's opinion, demechayev l'sha'avar kela haba, who is the opinion that says that you have to bring a korban both on your future tense vows and on your past tense vows. Because Rabbi Yishmael said it was only applicable to the future tense vows, and that had to do with their drasha on, I believe, the word v'nelam, how you use the word v'nelam. Anyway, meisvei. Okay, so let's ask the question. You say that Shevuos sheker is future tense, Shevuos shav is past tense. That's how we're learning this now. So ezo hi Shevuos shav. This brisa says, what is the definition of a Shevuos shav? So that's, we had been discussing and said it was past tense. Here it says, Nishba l'shanos es hayadua la'adam. A Shevuos shav is when you swear the opposite of something which is obvious. You swear a chair is a tree, right? The coffee is water, right? When I swear something which is obviously meaningless, that is a Shevuos shav. And Shevuos sheker, And Shevuos Sheker is nishba lehachlif. And Shevuos Sheker is when I take an oath to change the truth. I say I ate, but I didn't eat. Right? I say I didn't eat and I ate. That's a Shevuos Sheker. So now, if you're going to tell me Shevuos Sheker is future, that's not what this brisa says. This brisa says Shevuos Sheker is past tense. So the answer is Ema Nishba Umachlif. You're right. We'll have to change the text of this brisa to make it say that it is somebody who swears and then changes in the future, makes a future change to his actions so that he violates it. So that Sheker turns out to be in the future. Okay. That is how the first explanation, according to Rabbi Yochanan, goes of what all of these things are. That is Rabbin, right? We said that's, no, this is where coming up. That was Rav Dimi, the Rav Dimi's explanation. So now we're going to change. Now we're going to go Kiyasa Rabbin. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Yavo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Now Rabbin is going to give his explanation to how Sheker and Shav works. And he says like this. Achalti velo achalti, I ate and I did not eat. Past tense, that is sheker. Okay, that's false. Right? Again, we're making the distinction to the way we had said it before. False was future, and sheker is future, shav is past. Here, we start right off. Sheker is past tense. Okay? Vazhara say, and the prohibition is, milos ishbe'u bishmi l'sheker. Right? You should not swear to me in falsehood. Ochel velo ochel, future tense is over below yachel dvaro. That is just a prohibition of do not profane your words. We don't call that Shevuos Sheker. Now, the Rambam, when he brings this Gemara down, actually says that that swearing falsely to the future and the past are both Sheker. So how do we understand this Gemara? According to the Rambam saying it is Shevuos Sheker to swear to the future, just the prohibition is lo yachel dvaro. That's also a violation of lo yachel dvaro for the future. So in any event, Shevuos Sheker is past tense, future tense is lo yachel dvaro. Ve'ezo hi Shevuos Shav. So then what's Shevuos Shav? You already covered future and past. Where's Shevuos Shav? Shevuos Shav is nishba lishanos es hayadua la'adam. Shav is when I swear to something that is completely makes no sense. A tree is a rock, coffee is water, something that is completely meaningless. Okay?
Contradiction or whatever.
Yes, contradiction to the obvious, right? That's Shevuos Shav. So Sheker is going to be about I did something, I didn't do something, I will do something, I'm not going to do something. Shav is really when I when the oath has no meaning, right? Amar Rav Papa. So Rav Papa says, Had Rabbi Avo, this statement that Rabbi Avo made, right, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that we just quoted, Lav beferish itmar. That the story goes that he didn't say it outright. He didn't give a shear and say this is what sheker is, this is what shav is. Rather, ela miklol itmar. Rather, there was a teaching that he made, and the students who were there derived, based on what he was saying, this other halacha as well. Now, often when those types of things happen in the Gemara, usually we come out at the end and go, but there's another way of understanding the story. So this is how this story goes. Damar of Idi bar Abin. Rav Idi bar Abin said, Amar of Amram, then Rav Amram, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, then Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yehuda, Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Mishum Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, in the name of Rabbi Yossi HaGlili. Kol lo sa'aseh shebatorah, lav sheyesh bo ma'aseh, loken alav, v'she'ein bo ma'aseh ein loken. Famous, we know this, and this is why it's nice when you learn to Daf Yomi, everybody says, I don't do chazar, you remember things. When you start to see sugyas over and over and over again, we start to remember them. So here we are again. Famous old issue. When you have a prohibition in the Torah, if it has a prohibition that has an action, you get malchus for it. If it has no action, you don't get malchus for it. Chutz, except there are some exceptions. Minishba, umeimar, umekal. The exceptions are somebody who swears falsely, where there's no action, right? Swearing doesn't have an action. Meimar is the prohibition in this week's parsha, where I take an animal and I declare it to be kodesh, and I decide I want to switch it to another animal. So I flip it over and I say that animal's going to take care of it instead of that animal. You can't do that. You can't take the kedusha off of an animal unless it has a mum.
That'd be a false oath.
It has a special, we call it a tmura, right? We don't call it, it seems like an oath because basically you've declared it something, now you're switching it, you can't do that, but it actually has a name called a tmura. And a makalel es chavero b'shem, and somebody who curses his friend with the name, right? Rashi says b'shem ha'maforish, right? You use the name Yud Kei Vav Kei to curse a person, then that's where you're going to get malchus for that.
I swear I'm going to kill this person or something like that.
Sorry?
I swear that I'm going to...
No, you're cursing somebody using Hashem's name, right? So you curse.
I swear to you in God's name.
Not swearing, right? Cursing.
In God's name.
Right, cursing. That's going to be those are three examples. Now, Tosfos points out, what do you mean there's three examples? If Brian Schiffman were here, Brian would say, what are you talking about? What about Motzi Shemra? What about Adam Zomerman?
You're going to try 4 points, and he's going to try to argue with you.
Right, I had it in my head. That was the plan. The way the shiur, that was the way the shiur was supposed to go. So he's not. So Tosfos asks that question instead, and points out that even though the Gemara says except for these three exceptions, the Gemara doesn't. When the Gemara says a few exceptions, it doesn't mean those are all the exceptions. There are other exceptions as well. There are times that there are certain averos that Torah, and another explanation is those averos the Torah specifically says you get malchus, right? So there are exceptions because the Torah says there are exceptions. But this general rule obviously wouldn't apply when the Torah says it doesn't apply, right? But these are not. There's no pasuk that are not explicitly stated in the Torah that you get malchus. But these are the exceptions. Okay, so now let's go through them. Nishba, this oath. Minolan, how do I know that you're supposed to get malchus for that? I'm Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan says Mishum Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. He says, make sure it's Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai that I'm to that. Yep, it's Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Make sure. So Amar Kral pasuk says, Lo sisa shem Hashem Elokecha l'shav. You should not swear Hashem's name, ki lo yinaket, because you will not be cleansed. Right? That's this what we had just mentioned before. So that means based in Shalmala in Menakinoso, aval based in Shalmata Malkinoso. Right? That means that Hashem is not going to cleanse you for that avera. What has to happen? Based in down here has to give you malchus in order for you to get forgiven. Menakinoso, and that's how you get forgiveness. You have to get malchus. That's how we know that somebody who swears false. That's how we know somebody swears falsely gets malchus. Amar li Rav Papa la Abaye, and then we have Rav Papa said to Abaye, Dilma hachikam rachmana. Maybe that's not what's going on. Maybe the pasuk says like this: Lo yinakeh klal. You can't get any forgiveness at all. No, that's not. You can't say that because iksiv ki lo yinakeh kida kamart. If the pasuk said that you can't get an atonement, then what you were saying is correct. Ha shedichsiv. Now it says ki lo yinakeh Hashem. Hashem won't cleanse you. Hashem hudeinu menakeh. Then you have to explain the pasuk to mean Hashem will not forgive you. Aval based in shalmata malkinoso, but the based in down here is going to give you malchus for what you said. So that's how we know you get malchus for a shvuah. Menakinoso, and then you get forgiven. Okay, so now ashkechan shvuas shav. So that is a Shevuos shav, because that's what the pasuk is talking about. Shevuos shav, you have to get malchus for. Shevuos sheker minolan. Where's the Shevuos sheker? How do I know I get that? So Rabbi Yochanan didei Amar. So Rabbi Yochanan himself says, Lashav, shtei pamim. The pasuk says that you're not supposed to take an oath to Lashav, and it uses that word Lashav twice. And so why does it have to say it twice? Imeno inyan l'shvuas shav. If there's no need to prohibit a Shevuos shav twice. So therefore, to know inyan l'shvuas sheker. So therefore, I'm going to presume that one of them is imenu inyan, right? We're going to say if it doesn't need to apply to tell me that a Shevuos shav is prohibited twice, one of those times it says shav is to tell me that a Shevuos sheker also is prohibited and also gets malchus, gets lashes. V'havi ba Rabbi Yavo. Now this is where Rabbi Yavo pipes in. Okay, that was the statement that Rabbi Yavo made. Here's where Rabbi Yavo pipes in. Hai Shevuos sheker heichi dami. What is the circumstance of Shevuos sheker that you're supposed to, that the Torah is telling you I have to get malchus from this drasha? So if it's going to be a circumstance where he says, I'm not going to eat, and then he eats, so that can't be what we're talking about, because that's lav sheyesh bo ma'aser. There's an action there, right? He said he wasn't going to eat, and then he went down and sat down and he ate. Eating is the action, so therefore, of course he gets malchus for that. We wouldn't need a pasuk in the Torah to tell me that.
If you make a bracha, maybe you can say the bracha of Batal, he swore because you got the vera.
Wait, so if you're saying, can I make would bracha levatal because I swore and then I ate?
Yeah.
No, the bracha is not levatal because the bracha is effective on what I ate. I get the isser for eating, right? So the ella da'amar shvua she'ochel velo achal. So he's rather right. It's where he says, where he swears he will eat and then he does not eat. Okay, that's future tense, and there's no action there, right? Because he does the non-eating is the violation of the oath. So hi miloke, but in second, we know that both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both say about that case there is no malchus in that case. Why? The ha'itmar, as we said, Shevuos she'ochel kikar zu hayom. Right? Somebody says, I'm going to eat this loaf of bread today. V'avar hayom, and the day ends, v'lo achla, and he did not eat it. So they both say, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, Damri Tavayo, Einu Loke. Both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish say in that case, you don't get malchus for different reasons. Why? Rabbi Yochanan Amar Einu Loke Bishum Dehava Lav Shem B'Maiser. Rabbi Yochanan says, you don't get malchus because there's no action. You didn't eat it. V'chol Lav Shem B'Maiser Ein Loken Alav. And anything that you did, any prohibition that has no action, you're not going to get malchus for it. Reish Lakish, who would have said that isn't going to be the reason, he says, Lav Shem B'Maiser, you do get malchus for. Right? Reish Lakish says, Amar Eino Loka Mishum Dehave Hasra Safek. Reish Lakish, back in the day we had discussed, we said that's because he doesn't hold that the warning at the time of the oath would have been valid. Why? Because in order for a warning to take place and be effective, according to Reish Lakish, the warning has to immediately precede the violation of the Aveira. So when is he going to give the warning, right? If he told the guy right when he was taking that oath, well, that's not a warning because maybe he's going to fulfill the oath, and so it's not a violation. So that warning is meaningless. So you can't fasra safek lo shma asra. A doubtful warning is not going to be a valid warning. So that's not going to work. So V'amar Rabbi Avo. So Rabbi Avo then says, okay, well that means that Shevuos sheker. There's only two choices in the future tense where he has an action, in which case it's already clear he gets malchus for that. A shvua in the future where there's no action. And Rabbi Yochanan says you don't get malchus for that. So then, where's the case that Rabbi Yochanan said that you have a Shevuos sheker that the Torah specifically tells me to get malchus for it? So what is that? So Amar Rabbi Avo tehei ba'achalti v'lo achalti. It has to be past tense. It has to be the circumstance where he said, I ate or I didn't eat in the past tense. Therefore, that must be Shevuos sheker in the past tense. That's why Rabbi Avo says that's what Rabbi Yochanan means. That past tense, as opposed to Rabbi, who was it? I can't remember who it was again. It was as opposed to the opinion that we had Rav Dimi, who says that sheker is future, shav is past. He says there has to be Shevuos sheker, which is past, because how are you going to explain the statement of Rabbi Yochanan otherwise? Umayshna, Amar Rava beferish ribsa Torah Shevuos. So therefore, what's the difference? Why is there any difference? He says, Amarava, beferish ribsa Torah Shevuos sheker domel lishav. So the answer is because the Torah says that a Shevuos sheker is similar to Shevuos shav in some way. Ma shav lisha'avar, av sheker nami lisha'avar. Just like shav is a past tense oath, so to sheker is a past tense oath. Okay, so that's where that comes from. And so, in fact, we don't end the Gemara and say, oh, here's another way to understand it. Just that's a good point. That's how Rabbi Avo figured it out from this statement. Okay. Eisvei Rabbi Yirmiyah l'Rabbi Avo. So now Rabbi Yirmiyah asks Rabbi Avo, on Rabbi Avo's version of what Rabbi Yochanan says, hey, he asks the following question. Shavua shelo ochel kikar zu. So, Shavua, if a person takes an oath, right, that I will not eat this loaf of bread. Shavua shelo ochlena. Then he takes a second oath and he says, Shavua, that I will not eat it. And then he takes a third oath, Shavua shelo ochlena. I'm not going to eat it. So that's three separate oaths he takes. Okay? Ve'achla, now he eats it. So has he violated three prohibitions or has he violated one? So Eino chayev ela achas. He's only violated one prohibition. He's going to be only once. Okay? Because why? Because of the rule that ein shvua chal shvua. Once something is already prohibited by an oath, I can't prohibit it again with a second oath. Right?
But if you say you're not going to eat, and I'm making an oath I'm not going to eat, and I'm not going to eat bread, you eat both, and you're...
So that could, the other way, one of those ways works, the other way does not, right? If I say I'm not going to eat at all, then I say I'm not going to eat bread. So the second oath is meaningless. It's already encompassed by the first oath, so that's not going to work. But if you went the other way, I'm not going to eat bread, and then I said I'm not going to eat anything, that we call a davar mosif. The second oath is encompassing more things. And that does mean that the bread, if you eat that bread, then you are in violation of two separate oaths. So that would create that sort of, that's a rule that we're going to learn on the next page. It's called a davar mosif. So since you pointed out in a good example, so we should mention that. This is where he's actually just saying this loaf of bread, this loaf of bread, this loaf of bread. It's the exact same oath 3 times. That's why it doesn't work. Okay. So Zuhi Shevuos Bitui. This is a circumstance of the Shevuos Bitui. Shechayavin als dona malchus. That if you do it on purpose, you're going to get malchus. Val shigagasa korban ola v'yored. And so you're going to get, and if you do it b'shogeg, you get a korban ola v'yored. Now, Zuhi lemute mai. When the Brisa says, this is the example. Now, keep in mind, he's saying it's a Shevuos Sheker. Future tense Shevuos Sheker. This is the circumstance. So now, that means that there's another circumstance that doesn't warrant it. So, lav lumute achalti v'lo achalti. Isn't that what we're saying is that what's excluded is past tense, de lo lucky, so that you're not supposed to get lashes for the past tense? So the answer is low. No, that's not what it's talking about. Lumute achalti v'lo achalti mi korban. We're just saying that past tense, you're not going to have to bring the korban, right? And that's zuhi de al shigos a korban olav yored of achalti v'lochalti lo. This is the circumstance, the future tense Shevuos Sheker. You're going to bring korban olav yored, not the past tense one. And that we said was a machlokas Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. So this is Rabbi Yishmael. This is Rabbi Yishmael's viewpoint, right? Rabbi Yishmael says you're going to get malchus for sure on the future tense and the past tense. That everybody agrees. The question of whether you're chayav a korban olav yored on the past tense oath, that's subject to argument. Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. This brisa seems to say no. Zuhi, only the future tense is the one that you're going to get the court. You're going to be chayav the korban. That's how we're explaining the beginning of this Mishnah, right? Because that's Rabbi Yishmael. Da'amar, he's the one who says inu chayav elahal asid lavo. You're only going to be liable for violation of a future tense oath, not for a past tense oath. Aval milka lucky, but Rabbi Yishmael would still agree you're going to get lashes. So therefore, the idea that a Shevuos Sheker is only in the future tense, not in the past tense, is not. This doesn't knock off my opinion. Okay, but then Ema Seifa, the end of the brisa says, Zuhi Shevuos Shav shechayavin al zdona makos val shigagasa potter. Then we said the past tense, we call that a Shevuos Shav. Okay, and that's a circumstance where you're chayiv. If you're in, we give the circumstance of a Shevuos Shav. If you have a Shevuos Shav, so you're chayiv on, if you do it on purpose, makos, and on b'shogeg you are exempt. Right? This is a circumstance that the example that they give in that Mishnah. Is a circumstance of Shevuos Shav where he says this tree is a rock's tree. So that where we're going to say that if you do it b'mezid, you get malchos, but there's no korban for that. Shogi, there's no korban for that because the korban is only for the Shevuos Sheker, not for the Shevuos Shav. So zuhi lemute mai. What are we coming to exclude? That this only the Shevuos Shav is the circumstance. My lav lemute achalti v'lo achalti. Are we not trying to say that if he said I past tense Shevuos Sheker past tense, I ate and I didn't eat, de lo lucky that you're not going to get malchus? And so therefore, because this one you're going to get malchus? Lo, no, that's not what we're saying. Zuhi da al shigas apotter mi korban. This is the circumstance of Shav where you don't even need to bring a korban. But of al achalti v'lo achalti. But if he said past tense, I ate and I didn't eat al shigas achayev korban, then you would be liable korban. So now this second part of the Mishnah says why past tense.
Yeah.
That we had said there was an argument at the beginning of our Gemara back at the beginning about vanellam, whether the vanellam excludes this case or that case. So that was the Tuma case. Then we had a separate drasha. Wasn't vanellam. I'll take a look back what it was, but there's a separate drasha between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael about whether the korban olav yored applies to past tense or not, past tense or future tense. So this statement, this is Rabbi Akiva's opinion. That makes this part of the brisa Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Demechayev l'sha'avar kilahaba. He says now, according to this, that only Shevuos Shav is the one where you don't bring a korban. Shevuos Sheker, past tense Shevuos Sheker, you do have to bring a korban olav yored. So now that's means according to the end, it's Rabbi Akiva's position. Now, ha'amart reisha Rabbi Yishmael. So he says, but you said the beginning of the Mishnah was Rabbi Yishmael. When you said back in the point of the Mishnah where you said future tense is where you have to bring a korban, not past tense. So that was Rabbi Yishmael. Then later on, the Mishnah all of a sudden says, no, Shevuos Shav you bring a korban, not Shevuos Shav you don't bring a korban, but Shevuos Sheker past tense you do bring a korban. That's Rabbi Akiva. So Reisha Rabbi Yishmael was safe for Rabbi Akiva. How is our Mishnah switching back and forth from Rabbi Yishmael's point of view to Rabbi Akiva's point of view? So the answer is no. Kula Rabbi Akiva. The whole Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva's point of view. The Reisha, the beginning, lav lemute achalti v'lo achalti mi korban. Not like we said. it doesn't mean that when it says that in the future tense you're going to get malchus and a korban. I will eat, I won't eat, and then you do. So it's not not in the circumstance of I won't eat. Right? No, I will eat. Right? I will eat because that's the lav shemaisa. El mute ochel v'lo achal mi malchus. That's the point. When the person says I won't eat and then he does. So he gets malchus if he does on purpose because there's a maisa there, right? There's an action, and then he brings a korban,
Did you make it up? He's not going to eat, and then he eats at the end.
and then he eats at the end. So that's where there's an action, right? However, if he says about korban mechayev, but he says because if he says I will eat and then I won't eat. I'm sorry, I will eat, and then he doesn't eat. That's a lav. We said Rabbi Yochanan said that's a lav shem b'maisa. You don't get malchus for that, but nevertheless, you still bring a korban for that. Of a korban mechayev, you're going to still bring a korban, and then you're going to bring a korban in the past tense. Also, you're not going to bring a korban also in a Shevuos shav. So therefore, my shna. And so, what's the difference? Why is it that you wouldn't bring a korban in that case? Mistavra kai bilahaba. So he says, why does that make sense? Why would you say that it's coming to exclude a future tense case rather than a past tense case? That makes sense because kai bilahaba mimait lahaba. The first part of the mission, which is talking about future tense vows, so it's telling me in this future tense situation, you get malchus and you bring a korban, which means there's another future tense circumstance where you get a korban but you don't get malchus, and then kai bilahaba mimait lishavar. So that it wouldn't make sense that if I was talking about the future tense, that I would be excluding a past tense case. Then later on, when it says Shevuos shav, it's coming to exclude the Shevuos sheker. That Shevuos shav, you get malchus and no korban, whereas Shevuos sheker in the past tense, you get malchus and a korban. So it's all Rabbi Akiva's point of view. So that is the way, again, so now we have Rabin's point of view of how sheker and shav works. So to summarize Rabin's point of view, Shevuos sheker is to lie. Right. And the way the Rambam understands it, future tense, past tense, whatever it is, I will eat, I won't eat, I won't eat, I will eat. And essentially, in all of those Shevuos sheker circumstances, I'm going to bring, according to Rabbi Akiva, I'm going to bring a korban all v'yorei in all the cases. According to Rabbi Yishmael, only on the future tense cases, not on the past tense cases, but according to Rabbi Akiva, all cases. And 3 out of the 4 cases, I'm going to get malchus for them. I'm going to get malchus for the future tense case where I say I won't eat and then I did eat because that I did an action, and I'm going to not get malchus for the circumstance where I say I won't, I will eat but then I don't because that's a lav shem b'maisa. But the past tense cases where I immediately violate the prohibition as soon as I say it, I won't eat and I didn't eat and I did eat, and I'm lying immediately. Those cases, because we learn a connection to Shevuos shav, which also says that we get malchus immediately as soon as we do it, from the fact that it has ki lo yinaka Hashem, that Hashem that will not forgive you, but based in here gives you malchus for it. We say that applies also to a Shevuos sheker, past tense. You also get malchus for those circumstances. Okay, so that's how Shevuos sheker works. Shevuos shav is separate category. That's when I swear to something to contradict the obvious. Okay, good. Iboy lahu. I'm sorry. Shevuos shelo ochel v'achal kol shu chayav, right? Somebody takes an oath that he is not going to eat something, and then he eats, and Rabbi Akiva says any amount. Now that's a little bit unique, because normally there should be a minimum shiur to eating something. Mm-hmm. So, so the question is like this. Rabbi Akiva b'chol Torah kula, Rabbi Shimon svirlei, de mechayev b'mashu. Rabbi Shimon famously has the shita that eating any small amount automatically makes you liable. Is what we're saying here that Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Shimon all the time?
Like Rory was asking yesterday.
Yeah, so that's Rabbi Shimon's opinion. Does Rabbi Akiva hold like that all the time? And he's just saying that here because we're talking about oaths? Or is this a rule that Rabbi Akiva only holds by oaths, but he disagrees with Rabbi Shimon, and there's something special about oaths? Titania, as we learn in a brayso, Rabbi Shimon says, Kol shehu lemakos. Any time that you're going to be that you're not allowed to eat something. As soon as you eat any bit of it, you get malchus if you did it b'meis, if you did it on purpose. Lo amru v'lo amru kazayas. Now there's a halacha l'moshe misinai about these amounts. Why is there an amount of a kazayas? You're not going to be liable ella li'inin korban. Kazayas is only if you do it b'shogeg, whether I'm liable to a korban or not. But if I'm told don't eat on Yom Kippur and somebody gives me a warning, right? So then I'm chayiv immediately as soon as I do it. Even the slightest amount.
But even if it's not the warning, you eat on Yom Kippur because that's it. You're saying we're from Hashem. Maybe Chayav Misa or
Kares. Well, Kares is the Avera would normally be the case, but I would get Malchus if I was warned, right? If I got the warning, and if I ate a kazayis b'shogeg, then I'd bring a korban. Okay. Ubedinhu deboy ifluge bialma. V'haydeka miflig hacha lahodiacha kochan derabanan. So he says it could be that it makes sense that Rabbi Akiva really holds this shita all the time, and so then why did we bring it here when it comes to this specific circumstance? Why did we say Rabbi Akiva holds this way? The answer is in order to tell you the strength of the Rabbanan's opinion, that there's a reason to think that such a rule would not apply when it comes to oaths. Because even though I might have thought, Ho umeforish chayev stam nami chayev, I might have thought that because, let's say a person takes an oath and he says, I swear I won't even eat a crumb. So that works. And then if you eat a crumb, even though it's not a kazayas, you would be liable. Since I could be liable for a crumb in the circumstance, therefore, let's say I just say I won't eat it. So maybe that wouldn't be a kazayas. So kamash malan diptiri, dipatri. And so what we're saying is, the Rabbanan, who are arguing and saying that you need a kazayas, if all I said was, I will not eat it, I still need a kazayas. Despite the fact that when it comes to oaths, there could be a circumstance where I could be liable for even a crumb, the Rabbanan say, no, if I didn't say that, I don't mean that. Therefore, it has to be eating, has to be a whole kazayas. Oh, Dilma, or are we saying that Bialma Karabanan Svirale, that really Rabbi Akiva, generally speaking, holds like the Rabbanan, you always need a kazayas amount in order to be in violation. V'hacha hainu taima. And here, the special reason why Rabbi Akiva holds only by oaths you're liable if you eat the smallest amount is exactly because of that. Ho mefarish chayev, just like if Rabbi Akiva says, since if I would have specified in my oath that I will not even eat a crumb, stam nami chayev. So if I just say plain, I will not eat, I'm also liable for a crumb, right? I don't need a kazayas unless I specifically say I will not eat a kazayas. Since an oath could have such a strict meaning, therefore, says Rabbi Akiva, the rule by general is I need a kazayas, but by an oath, it could be any amount. Because I could have such a thing as an oath where I'm liable for any amount. Toshmas, and now we got to figure out, what is Rabbi Akiva holding in general about the smallest amounts? Or is this a rule just by oaths? So Tashma, to Amrullah Rabbi Akiva. So now, what happened in our Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva, they said to Rabbi Akiva, Hey Chamatzina, ba'ochel kol shu chayev, shezeh chayev. What are you talking about, Rabbi Akiva? How do you ever find in any circumstance that you'd be liable for eating just the smallest amount? Ve'mihisa, now if he holds that that's the way it is in all circumstances, Leimalu, why doesn't he just answer them? Anabechal Tarakulak, Rabbi Shimon Tzvirli says, I hold that way all the time. What are you talking about? Where else do you see that? The answer is everywhere. It's always that's the way it is. So the answer is, why doesn't Rabbi Akiva answer that? Is liv divrayim derabanan kamarlu. Rabbi Akiva's answering them according to their own shita, meaning lididi. That's not even a question on me for sure, because b'chol tzara kulik, Rabbi Shimon's fairly. I always hold like Rabbi Shimon. The smallest amount is always what's going to make me liable. Lididchu, but according to you guys, oduli miha, you need to at least admit to me, ho mefarish chayev stam nami chayev, that since he could have been liable for even the smallest crumb, therefore, when he doesn't specify the smallest crumb, for sure he's still liable for the smallest crumb. From the Rabbanan, which the Rabbanan said, no, we don't agree with you. Okay, Tashma, come and listen. Rabbi Akiva says, Nazir sheshara pito b'yayin. Let's say we try to figure out, what does Rabbi Akiva need, the smallest drop or not? So a Nazir who dips his bread in wine. Now, the wine mixed together with the bread has a kazayas. So now he's chayev. Now, if Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Shimon, why does he have to combine? Even the slightest drop of wine is going to make him liable. The Odin, furthermore, Tanan, we learn in another Mishnah. Shevuos shelo achal v'achal nevelos utrefos shkotzim v'ramasim. Right, he takes an oath that he will not eat, and then he eats nevela, trefos, shkotzim, v'ramasim, prohibited items. He is liable, he's chayev. Rabbi Shimon poter, and Rabbi Shimon says you're poter. V'avinam ba, and we ask the following question: am I chayev? Why would you be liable? Mushbit me'ar sinaihu. The oath shouldn't take effect, as we said. If you already take an oath to not do something that is prohibited already in the Torah, it shouldn't count. So the answer is Rav Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan, Damrei Tarai, both Rabbi Shmuel. So Rav Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan, they both say Bekol dvar mamutarm imad dvar masurim. This is what we said, right? What we used before. The answer is that he increased what was prohibited because he said, "I will not eat anything," and then he ate prohibited items. The prohibited items are included in his oath because he said he wouldn't eat anything. If he had said he won't eat prohibited items, that would have been a shvuah. But by saying I won't eat anything, that is a shvuah. Reish Lakish says, no, iya tamotze ella I b'mafarish chatzi shir. Oh, you know what? We're going to continue on. So let's get to the dots. Reish Lakish will say, iya tamotze ella I b'mafarish chatzi shir, right? That you're not going to find a circumstance where you're going to be liable unless he specifically states that he's going to be liable for a half amount, meaning that he doesn't hold of this Isser Kolel. He's not saying you're going to be in violation of an oath if you eat treif or whatever, because it doesn't work. It's always prohibited. Even though I added on more things, it's always prohibited. But you know when you could wind up violation of an oath for eating treif? If I said, I will not even eat a half amount. Because eating a half amount wouldn't be prohibited enough. So now, V'alib the Rabbanan, this is according to the Rabbanan. Now, ibistam. So now, if according to Stam, V'alib the Rabbi Akiva, Damar Adam Oser Atzmo B'chol Shehu, if you're going to tell me that Rabbi Akiva, as soon as he makes an oath, it means any, even the smallest amount. V'yisako daitach b'yamah Rabbi Shimon Svirli, if he holds like Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon in all circumstances, Kol Shehu Nami Mushbavo Mimar Sinayu. So how's this shvuah going to work according to Reish Lakish anyway? Because there's no such thing as saying I'm not going to eat a half a shear because he's already immediately prohibited in any small amount anyway. El Lav Shema, we see clearly from here, Bi'alma K'Rabbanan Svirli, that normally Rabbi Akiva holds like the Rabbanan, that needs to be a kazayas, Shema Mino. So you see clearly from these circumstances that Rabbi Akiva says normally you need a kazayas. It's just in this circumstance by shvuah that he says even in the smallest amount. So stop here because time for sorry for rushing to the end. But